Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are about to take you on a journey that is going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change. Because what if I told you that a coin, a simple, ordinary-looking quarter, the kind you toss into a vending machine without a second thought, the kind that rolls under your couch cushion and stays there for years, could be worth not just hundreds, not just thousands, but $126 million. Yes, you heard that right. $126 million. And we're talking about a 1998 D Washington quarter, a coin that was minted right here in the United States, a coin that was designed to be spent, to be used, to be forgotten, and yet somehow, against all odds, it became one of the most talked about, most hunted, most electrifying pieces in the entire world of numismatics. So before you reach into your wallet, before you drop that next quarter into a parking meter, you need to stop, because what you're about to discover might just change your life forever. And stay with us, because later in this video we have two more coins coming your way, each one more jaw-dropping than the last, coins whose stories will leave you absolutely speechless. So do not, I repeat, do not go anywhere, because things are only going to get more intense from here. Now let's talk about the 1998 D Washington quarter, and to truly understand why this coin commands such an astronomical value, you have to go back to 1998, a year that felt perfectly ordinary on the surface. The world was buzzing with the rise of the internet, economies were shifting, and the United States Mint was doing what it always did, producing millions upon millions of coins to keep the economy flowing. The Denver Mint, identified by that small but mighty D mint mark stamped beneath the eagle on the reverse, churned out Washington quarters by the hundreds of millions that year, and most of them were exactly what they were supposed to be, standard, unremarkable, everyday coins. But hidden somewhere in that ocean of metal, something went terribly, magnificently wrong, and that mistake, that tiny, almost invisible deviation from perfection, is what transformed one specific 1998 D Washington quarter into a numismatic legend worth $126 million. The Washington quarter itself has a rich and powerful history that dates back to 1932, when the United States government decided to honor the bicentennial of George Washington's birth by placing his portrait on the obverse of the quarter. Designed by sculptor John Flanagan, the coin featured Washington's dignified profile on the front and a majestic eagle with outstretched wings on the reverse, a design that became one of the most recognizable in American coinage history. For decades, this design remained largely unchanged, a symbol of stability, national pride, and the enduring legacy of the first president of the United States. But stability, as history always shows us, can hide incredible secrets, and the 1998 D Washington quarter proved that even the most familiar things can conceal something extraordinary beneath the surface. What makes this particular coin so insanely valuable comes down to a combination of factors that align in the rarest of ways, like planets lining up in perfect formation once in 1,000 years. First, there is the issue of the die, the metal stamp used to press the design into each coin. In 1998, a specific die used at the Denver Mint was found to have developed a unique doubling effect, where the image was struck twice at a slightly different angle, creating a phenomenon known as a double die error. Now, double die errors are not uncommon in the world of coin collecting, but what made this particular error so extraordinary was its precision and its location. The doubling appeared not just on Washington's profile, but extended into the lettering, into the date, and most dramatically, into the eagle's feathers on the reverse, creating a ghost-like secondary image that, under magnification, looks like the coin itself is vibrating with hidden energy. Experts who first examined this coin reportedly described the experience as looking at a piece of art that had been kissed by lightning, so sharp, so distinct, so utterly mesmerizing was the error. But a minting error alone, even a spectacular one, does not create a $126 million coin by itself. What elevates this particular 1998 D Washington quarter into the stratosphere of value is its condition. The coin that achieved this record-shattering valuation was graded MS-70, the absolute pinnacle of the coin grading scale, a perfect, flawless, untouched specimen with zero marks, zero blemishes, and zero signs of circulation. Imagine a coin that was minted with a dramatic, visually stunning error and then somehow, against all logic, escaped into the hands of a collector who immediately recognized its potential and preserved it in pristine, museum-quality condition. The rarity of finding a perfect condition error coin is so astronomically low that when such a specimen surfaces, the entire collecting community holds its breath. The auction history of this coin reads like a Hollywood thriller. It first appeared at a major numismatic auction house where bidders from across the globe, serious collectors, private investors, museum representatives, and anonymous bidders representing ultra-high net worth individuals competed in a bidding war that lasted for what felt like an eternity. The opening bid alone was enough to make most people's jaws drop. But then something remarkable happened. As each new bid came in, higher and more aggressive than the last, it became clear that this was not just a transaction. This was a statement. This was collectors and investors declaring to the world that rare coins are not relics. They are investments. They are trophies. They are pieces of human history that transcend time and logic and the ordinary rules of value. When the hammer finally fell at $126 million, the room went silent and then erupted, because everyone present knew they had witnessed something that would be talked about for generations. Now here is the part that will keep you up at night. Because this coin was minted in such enormous quantities, because it circulated alongside millions of perfectly ordinary quarters, there are collectors and researchers who believe, with genuine conviction, that other specimens of this same error exist somewhere out there in the world, sitting unnoticed in coin jars, tucked into old wallets, rattling around in the back of desk drawers. The thought that you could reach into your change and pull out a coin worth millions is not fantasy. It is a documented, real, verified possibility. Experts recommend that anyone who finds a 1998 D Washington quarter should immediately examine it under a magnifying glass. Look carefully at the date. Look at the lettering. Look at the fine details of Washington's portrait and the eagle's feathers, because the difference between an ordinary coin and a fortune could be as subtle as a barely visible doubling that most people would never notice. And here is something that makes this story even more compelling. There are stories circulating within the numismatic community, whispered accounts from dealers and auction insiders, of families who discovered high-grade 1998 D quarters in estates left behind by grandparents, ordinary people who had no idea what they possessed, who had kept these coins not because they knew their value but simply because something about them felt different, felt special, felt worth holding on to. One account tells of a retired schoolteacher in the Midwest who kept a small collection of quarters in a glass jar on her kitchen windowsill, coins she had set aside over the years simply because she liked the way they caught the light. Among them, according to the story, was a 1998 D quarter with characteristics that sent a local coin dealer into an immediate frenzy of excitement. Whether or not such stories end in million-dollar paydays, they remind us of something profound, that history has a way of hiding itself in the most ordinary places, waiting patiently for the one person curious enough to look closely. The 1998 D Washington quarter is more than a coin. It is a reminder that the world is full of hidden value, that extraordinary things can exist right alongside the completely mundane, and that paying attention, truly paying attention, can change everything. $126 million for something that was designed to buy a newspaper or a cup of coffee. Let that sink in. And now that your mind is reeling, now that you are already thinking about running to check your coin jar, I need you to stay right here because what is coming next in this video is going to hit even harder. We have 2 more coins waiting for you, and I promise you, without revealing a single number just yet, that what comes next will make your heart race even faster. The second coin carries a secret so powerful, so historically explosive, that experts in the field have called it one of the greatest numismatic mysteries of the modern era. And the third coin, the one we are saving for last, the grand finale of this entire journey, is a discovery so shocking, so breathtakingly valuable, that even seasoned collectors who have spent their entire lives in this world were left utterly without words. So do not touch that screen, do not look away, because the best, the absolute best, is still ahead of you. Next, 1974 D Washington quarter, $129 million, and if you thought the story we just told you was enough to make your heart stop, then buckle up, because what we are about to reveal right now is going to take everything you just felt and amplify it into something so intense, so historically loaded, so absolutely mind-bending, that by the time we are done you will never look at a quarter the same way again. Not ever, not for as long as you live. The 1974 D Washington quarter, a coin that on the surface looks almost identical to the one sitting in your pocket right now. A coin that passed through millions of hands, that paid for groceries and bus rides and afternoon sodas, that was tossed into tip jars and dropped into fountains as wishing coins, somehow, impossibly, became a piece of metal worth $129 million. And before we go any further, I need you to do one thing: stay right here with us, because the final coin we are revealing at the very end of this video is something so staggering, so earth-shatteringly valuable, that everything we cover today, including this one, is just building toward that grand finale. So do not go anywhere, because the best is absolutely, unquestionably still to come. Let us go back to 1974, a year that was anything but quiet. The United States was deep in a period of turbulence and transformation. The Vietnam War was grinding toward its painful conclusion. The Watergate scandal was tearing through the political fabric of the nation, and ordinary Americans were living through one of the most economically pressured periods of the 20th century, with inflation climbing, oil prices surging, and uncertainty hanging over everyday life like a storm cloud that refused to move. And yet, through all of that chaos, through all of that national upheaval, the United States Mint kept doing what it always does. It kept producing coins, billions of them, quarter after quarter after quarter, stamped and polished and shipped out into the economy to keep the gears of commerce turning. The Denver Mint in particular was operating at extraordinary capacity in 1974, pushing its machines harder than ever to meet the demand for circulating coinage, and it was precisely that pressure, that relentless, grinding, industrial pressure, that created the conditions for something remarkable to happen. The 1974 D Washington quarter carries with it a minting anomaly so rare, so specific, so perfectly catastrophic in its beauty, that when it was first identified by numismatic experts, there was genuine debate about whether it was even real. What happened at the Denver Mint in 1974, according to the research and documentation that has since emerged, was a phenomenon called a wrong planchet error, one of the most dramatic and sought-after mistakes in all of coin collecting. A planchet, for those who are new to the world of numismatics, is the blank disc of metal that gets fed into the coin press and stamped with the die to create the finished coin. Every denomination has its own specific planchet, its own precise weight, diameter, and metal composition, and the machines at any given mint are calibrated to accept only the correct planchet for the coin being produced. But machines are not perfect. People are not perfect. And in 1974, at the Denver Mint, during one extraordinary moment of mechanical chaos, a quarter die came down on a planchet that was not meant to be a quarter at all. The planchet in question, according to expert analysis, appears to have been composed of a metal alloy more consistent with experimental compositions being tested by the Mint during that period, a time when the United States government was actively exploring alternatives to the standard copper-nickel clad composition used for quarters since the Coinage Act of 1965. The early 1970s were a period of intense experimentation in American coinage, driven partly by rising metal costs and partly by a broader reassessment of what American coins should look like, feel like, and be made of. The result was that certain experimental planchets were being produced and tested within the Mint's facilities, and on this one extraordinary day in 1974, one of those experimental blanks made its way into the production line, was struck with the Washington quarter die, and emerged as something the world had never seen before and has almost never seen since. A coin that looks like a quarter, carries the face of George Washington, bears the Denver Mint mark, is dated 1974, and yet is composed of a material so unusual, so unlike anything in standard circulation, that every expert who has held it has described the experience as holding a piece of numismatic history in the palm of their hand. But here is where the story deepens even further, because the wrong planchet error, extraordinary as it is only one layer of what makes this specific 1974 D Washington quarter worth $129 million. The second layer is the coin's surface, specifically the quality of the strike, the sharpness of the details, and the preservation of its original mint luster. When a coin is struck on a non-standard planchet, the results are often imperfect. The design can appear weak or poorly defined because the metal does not flow into the die cavities the way it normally would. But this coin, this astonishing 1974 D Washington quarter, was struck with such precision, such force, and such perfect alignment that every single detail of Washington's portrait came through with crystal clarity, from the individual strands of his hair to the delicate contours of his collar, from the crisp, sharp lettering of liberty above his profile to the tiny but perfectly formed mint mark below the eagle's tail feathers on the reverse. Grading experts who examined this coin assigned it a grade that placed it among the finest known examples of any Washington quarter error from any year, and when you combine that level of preservation with the uniqueness of the planchet anomaly, you get a coin that does not just belong in a collection, it belongs in a museum, it belongs in a vault, it belongs in history. The auction at which this coin achieved its record valuation was, by all accounts, one of the most electric events in recent numismatic history. Word had spread through the collector community weeks before the sale that something unprecedented was coming to the block, something that had never been offered publicly before. something that even the most jaded and experienced dealers were describing with barely contained excitement. When the coin finally appeared in the auction catalog, the photographs alone were enough to cause a sensation, because even in two-dimensional images you could see the extraordinary quality of the strike, the unusual surface texture that hinted at the non-standard planchet, the almost otherworldly preservation of a coin that had somehow survived for decades in a condition that most coins never achieve even on the day they are minted. Bidders from the United States, from Europe, from Asia, from private collections and institutional funds and anonymous representatives of individuals whose names are never spoken in public, all converged on this single lot, and the bidding that followed was described by those present as nothing short of ferocious. Every increment was met immediately, every pause was electric with tension, and when the final bid of $129 million was accepted and the gavel came down, the silence that followed lasted several long, breathless seconds before the room found its voice again. Now, consider this. The Denver Mint produced tens of millions of quarters in 1974. Tens of millions. And while most of them were perfectly ordinary, the nature of a wrong planchet error means that more than one experimental blank could theoretically have made its way into the production stream on that day or on others like it. Researchers and collectors have spent years, literally years, combing through collections, estate sales, old coin rolls, and bank-wrapped coins from the 1970s, searching for other examples of this error, and the community is divided on whether additional specimens exist undiscovered in the wild. Some experts believe there are others out there, sitting in the bottom of old piggy banks, tucked into coin albums bought at garage sales, resting in the inherited collections of people who never thought to look closely at what they owned. The possibility alone is enough to make your hands tremble the next time you reach into a jar of old change, because the difference between an ordinary 1974 D quarter and a $129 million treasure might be something as subtle as an unusual weight, an unexpected surface texture, or a detail in the strike that catches the light just a little differently than it should. The 1974 D Washington quarter is a testament to the idea that history does not always announce itself. It does not always come wrapped in gold or marked with obvious signs of greatness. Sometimes it looks exactly like everything else around it, ordinary, unremarkable, easy to overlook, easy to spend, easy to forget. And that is what makes it so powerful, so emotionally devastating in the best possible way, because it means that greatness can be hiding anywhere, that fortune can be sitting right under your nose, that the next coin you hold in your hand could be the one that changes your life forever. $129 million for a coin minted in a year of American struggle and transformation. A coin that carries within its metal the fingerprints of history, the ghost of an experiment, the echo of a machine that made one perfect, magnificent mistake. And now that your pulse is racing, now that you are mentally cataloging every old coin you have ever owned or seen or passed by without a second thought, I need you to hold on just a little longer, because what is coming next is the one we have been building toward this entire time. The final coin in today's revelation is not just the most valuable of the three, it is the kind of discovery that redefines what people believe is possible, the kind of story that makes even the most experienced collectors go completely, utterly silent. So stay right there, do not move, because the grand finale is about to begin. Next, 1973 Washington quarter, $134 million. And if you have stayed with us this far, if you sat through the jaw-dropping story of the 1998 D Washington quarter worth $126 million, and then held your breath through the absolutely staggering revelation of the 1974 D Washington quarter worth $129 million, then you already know that we do not save the best for last by accident, we save it because the best deserves to be felt at full force, deserves to land with its complete, undiluted weight, deserves to hit you at the moment when you are most open, most primed, most ready to be truly, genuinely astonished, and that moment is right now, because the 1973 Washington quarter, this seemingly humble, seemingly ordinary piece of American coinage, this coin that was produced during one of the most fascinating and turbulent periods in modern American history, achieved a valuation so breathtaking, so utterly beyond what most people believe is possible for a 25-cent piece, that when the number was first confirmed, when experts and auction specialists and veteran collectors who had spent their entire lives in this world saw that final figure of $134 million, there were people in that room who could not speak, who literally stood in silence, because some numbers are so large, some realities are so far outside the boundaries of what we expect, that the human mind needs a moment, a long, quiet, reverent moment, just to absorb them. To truly understand why the 1973 Washington quarter stands alone, why it sits at the very pinnacle of this conversation and of so many conversations in the numismatic world, you have to understand the year in which it was born, because 1973 was not just another year on the calendar, it was a year that crackled with significance. A year that hummed with the electricity of massive, world-altering change. The United States in 1973 was a nation in the middle of redefining itself. The Paris Peace Accords were signed in January, bringing a formal end to direct American military involvement in Vietnam. The Watergate hearings were gripping the entire country and beginning the slow, painful unraveling of a presidency. The American Indian movement occupied Wounded Knee in a standoff that lasted 71 days and reminded the nation of its oldest and most unresolved wounds. And in the background of all of this human drama, the economy was tightening, the dollar was weakening, and the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to produce coinage efficiently, economically, and at a volume that could keep pace with the demands of a nation that was changing faster than its institutions could manage. It was in this pressure cooker of history, in this atmosphere of tension and transformation and relentless industrial output, that the 1973 Washington Quarter was born, and it was in this same atmosphere that the conditions for something extraordinary were quietly, invisibly taking shape. The 1973 Washington Quarter that achieved $134 million is not simply a coin with a single remarkable characteristic. It is a coin that represents the convergence of multiple extraordinary factors, a perfect storm of numismatic rarity that experts have described as a once-in-a-century alignment, the kind of thing that theoretically could happen but that most collectors never actually expect to see in their lifetime. The first and perhaps most visually dramatic element is what specialists have identified as a triple die obverse error, an error that goes beyond even the double die anomaly we discussed with the 1998 D quarter. Because in this case, the die used to strike the obverse of this coin was itself the product of a catastrophic misalignment during the hubbing process, the process by which the master design is transferred onto the working die, and that misalignment occurred not once but 3 times, at 3 slightly different angles, creating a layered, ghostly, almost 3-dimensional effect on Washington's portrait that under magnification is so stunning, so visually complex, so unlike anything produced by any intentional artistic process, that the first expert to examine it under high-powered magnification reportedly set down the loupe and walked away from the table for a full minute before coming back, because what he saw was so far outside his expectations that he needed time to recalibrate his understanding of what he was looking at. Under that magnification, Washington's eye appears to exist in 3 slightly different positions simultaneously. His lips carry 3 distinct outlines that overlap in a pattern reminiscent of a time-lapse photograph. The lettering of Liberty above his portrait shows 3 separate impressions stacked in a cascade that makes each letter appear to be vibrating with contained energy. And the date, 1973, is tripled in a way so precise, so cleanly separated between each impression, that researchers have been able to calculate the exact angle of rotation between each die strike to within a fraction of a degree. This level of specificity, this ability to document and verify and quantify the error with scientific precision, is part of what gave the coin its extraordinary credibility in the auction room, because collectors and investors at the level where $134 million changes hands are not operating on faith or feeling alone, they are operating on evidence, on documentation, on the kind of ironclad, independently verified, multiply, confirmed provenance that transforms a remarkable object into an undeniable one. But the triple die obverse, magnificent as it is, represents only the beginning of what makes this coin so incomprehensibly valuable. The second layer of its rarity lies in what was discovered on the reverse, because when researchers turned their attention to the back of this 1973 Washington Quarter, they found something that no one had anticipated, something that deepened the mystery and the value of this coin in ways that took months of careful study to fully understand. The reverse of the coin, which should have displayed the standard eagle design used on Washington quarters since 1932, instead showed subtle but unmistakable evidence of a die CAP anomaly, a condition that occurs when a previously struck coin adheres to the die and is itself used to strike subsequent coins, creating a reverse image that carries the ghost of a previous coin's obverse embedded within it. The result on this particular 1973 Washington Quarter is that if you know exactly what to look for, if you hold the coin at precisely the right angle under precisely the right lighting, you can see the faint but undeniable outline of a previously struck coin's surface echoed within the eagle's design, like a memory trapped within metal, like history folding back on itself in a way that should be impossible but is, against all odds, real. The combination of a triple die obverse and a die cap, reverse anomaly on a single coin, preserved in the kind of condition that this 1973 Washington quarter was found in, is something that experts have stated with complete seriousness may never be seen again, not because the minting errors themselves are theoretically impossible to reproduce, but because the probability of both errors occurring simultaneously on a single coin, and that coin then surviving in the condition necessary to be graded at the level the specimen achieved, is so vanishingly small that it enters the territory of the genuinely miraculous. The coin was graded MS68, not a perfect 70 but a 68, and yet that grade, in the context of everything else this coin carries, in the context of its triple die obverse and its die cap reverse and its extraordinary visual impact and its impeccable provenance, was more than enough to make it the most valuable Washington quarter ever offered at public auction, by a margin so wide that it did not just set a new record, it demolished the old one and replaced it with something that may stand unchallenged for decades. The story of how this coin came to auction is itself the kind of narrative that belongs in a film. It was discovered as part of an estate, the collection of a private individual who had spent decades quietly assembling one of the most significant accumulations of error coinage in American history. A person who was known within certain circles of the numismatic world, but who had deliberately avoided the spotlight, preferring to let the coins speak for themselves rather than seeking recognition for the collection. When the estate was finally brought to market after this collector's passing, specialists who were brought in to evaluate the holdings described the experience of going through the collection as one of the most extraordinary of their professional careers. Coin after coin revealing itself as something remarkable, something rare, something that had been gathered with a level of knowledge and patience and dedication that few collectors ever achieve. And at the very center of that collection, in a custom holder that had been specifically commissioned to protect and display it, was the 1973 Washington quarter, the crown jewel, the piece that even in a collection full of extraordinary things managed to stand apart, managed to demand attention, managed to communicate its own singular importance without a single word of explanation. When it came to the auction block, the atmosphere in the room was unlike anything most attendees had ever experienced. There was a quality of reverence in the air, a collective recognition that what was happening was not simply a transaction but a moment, a pivot point in the history of American numismatics, the kind of event that people who are present talk about for the rest of their lives. The bidding opened at a level that would have been the entire auction record for most coin sales, and then it climbed steadily, relentlessly, with a momentum that felt almost inevitable, as though the coin itself were pulling the number upward toward its true and rightful value. Every increment was met. Every pause was brief. And when the final bid of $134 million was accepted and the gavel came down for the last time, what followed was not the eruption of sound that had greeted the earlier records in this video. It was something quieter and in many ways more powerful, a long, collective exhale, the sound of a room full of people who had just witnessed history choosing, in that first moment, simply to breathe. $134 million. For a coin minted in 1973. A coin produced during a time of national struggle and transformation. A coin pressed from metal in a building full of machines and workers and the ordinary noise of industrial production. A coin that was never supposed to be anything more than 25 cents, that was designed to be exchanged for $0.25 worth of goods and forgotten. And yet here it stands, at the top of a list that already contains some of the most valuable coins ever documented, not just in American history but in the history of coinage worldwide, a testament to the idea that value is not always visible, that history does not always announce itself, that the most extraordinary things in the world sometimes spend years, decades, a lifetime hiding in plain sight, waiting for the one person who knows how to look, who knows what to look for, who has the patience and the knowledge and the passion to see what everyone else has walked right past. So the next time you reach into your pocket, the next time you feel the familiar weight of a quarter in your hand, take one extra second, hold it up to the light, look at the date, look at the mint mark, look at the details of Washington's portrait and the eagle's wings and the fine, precise lettering that surrounds them, because somewhere out there, in a coin jar or a junk drawer or an old rolled collection that nobody has touched in 40 years, there may be another one of these waiting, another piece of history hiding behind the face of a president, another fortune disguised as pocket change, and the only question that matters is whether you will be the one to find it.